When I was in college, I lived with roommates in a 5-bedroom house just outside the city. The house was built before any of the surrounding neighborhood existed, and as such, it sat sideways on our street. The right side had a fancy porch and front door. It was a duplex, and that side of the house was owned by a guy who lived alone. He made a lot of money in whatever it was that he did for a living, and clearly traveled a lot, as he was rarely home. Our side was obviously once the back of the house. The house had been split down the middle sometime after it had been built, and you could tell. A staircase was squeezed in randomly in the back hallway. The basement door had just been walled off, things like that. There were big gaps between the wall and the floor in some places, and in one of them you could even see several scraps of paper with barely legible writing on them. It was a quirky house, but we were a quirky group, mostly art students attending the several art schools in our city. We constantly had people graduating and moving back home, so the rooms changed hands quite a few times. The walls were decorated with paintings and sculptures from both roommates and friends. One particular painting always seemed to catch people's attention, even though it didn't necessarily stand out much. One of the original roommates had painted it. It was based on a bust that she had seen somewhere of an old woman, and she had painted it as if it were a person, giving it skin tone and texture. I had joked about the painting ever since I first saw it, how it just creeped me out from the moment I saw it. My bedroom was the only one on the first floor, and the painting sat at the top of the stairs. This meant I had to walk right by it to go to the bathroom. It bothered me, but not enough to do anything about it at first. Eventually, it got to be too much. Late at night, when the house was dark and quiet, I couldn't even stand to walk by it. I would go out of my way to use the back stairs to the bathroom, or in very desperate moments, I would even go outside. Eventually, I went to my roommate in confidence, not sure how to approach the situation. I told her that I loved her art, and even this painting was technically impressive. It just affected me somewhere deep down, and I could no longer deal with it. She was very understanding, and we rotated the artwork in the house so that this painting was now in the living room. Here's where I lose people. I think this upset the painting. It was almost instantly that weird things started happening. My roommates and I would talk about how uneasy we felt in the house sometimes, like there might be some kind of presence there. It started as joking, but as time went on, we all started to take it more seriously. Our first summer in the house came around, and some of us went back with our families and sublet our rooms. I stayed behind, as I had nowhere to really go at the time. One of the rooms on the top floor went to a girl that we found on Craigslist. The roommate, M, who contacted her, had admittedly never lived for an extended period of time with people that she liked, so she always sublet her rooms this way. The subletter, K, was odd from the get-go. I met her one night when I came home from work. She was just hanging out in the living room with them, talking about whatever. M had an exasperated look on her face and asked me if I would go to the store with her. K came along with us, tried to get some ice cream, but couldn't pay, so I paid for her. We walked back to the house, and Kay decided to head home, got on her bike, and left. M breathed a huge sigh of relief, and then told me that Kay had only come by for a quick tour, but stayed for 8 hours. She just wouldn't take the hint to leave, and since she didn't technically live there, M hadn't wanted to leave her alone. So she's awkward, I thought, and brushed it off. Kay came back about a week later to give us a check, and stayed for 6 hours this time, again. No one was really sure what to do. A few weeks after that, Kay moved in. She kept to herself mostly, but all of our interactions with her were batshit insane. She carried around a blonde wig at all times, but I never saw her wear it. She just always had it. She insisted on keeping a mini fridge in the bathroom for her cooking ingredients, claiming that the fridge in the kitchen overwhelmed her. She had a hammock that she strung up on the side of the house and would sleep out there more often than inside. All of her possessions were in a trunk that sat in the living room, and I eventually caught her trying to coax out a mouse that had been living in this trunk. She often came home with different guys who worked at the shops and restaurants right there in the neighborhood. One time I came home to see her sprawled out asleep on the porch in front of the door, her wig tightly in hand. When I got curious one day and looked in the fridge and found a bag of dead cicadas, and wouldn't you know it, she was obsessed with this painting. She would talk about it all the time. So she was weird, overbearingly weird. It came together a little bit for me when I found a pill bottle of hers now being used for spices, and being the nosy prick that I am, I googled the medication. I can't for the life of me remember what it was, but it was some heavy-duty antipsychotic med. One day, Em came back to visit. She told me she had been in Kay's room and found, stapled to the ceiling, a collection of used condoms. Em came back one day with all of her stuff to move back in, and Kay flipped out. They had allegedly agreed that the sublease was over on this day, but Kay insisted that it wasn't. After a big argument, Kay decided that she would stay out in her hammock for the remainder of her time there. A few days later, I came home from work and found my roommates and several friends sitting around wide-eyed. Apparently, while I was gone, Kay had come home with a much older gentleman, locked herself in the bathroom with him, and had loud sex for a long time. She came out and told everyone in there that she had gotten her revenge for kicking her out. We discovered that this revenge involved taking all of her used condoms and emptying the contents all over the bathroom. She then began crying uncontrollably and left the house, and we never saw her again. That doesn't mean she wasn't still around. Her stuff mysteriously disappeared one day, and no one had seen her come back for it. Even more troubling, the keys to the basement had gone missing. We worked up the balls to go down there and look around, but found no trace of her. It didn't matter. As long as she had those keys, she could get in and out whenever she wanted, and we would all occasionally swear we heard voices down there. Before Kay, the house was a little creepy. After Kay, the house became downright disturbing, and all of it centered around this painting. One night, I was in the living room with a few friends, smoking joints and what have you. No one else was home. I was telling them about Kay, and about how creepy the house was in general. As soon as I got to the part about the painting, almost on cue, the painting flew off the wall. It didn't fall, it flew, and landed all the way across the room. We looked at each other shocked and booked it out of there and down the street. We walked around for a bit, but it was my house and I eventually had to go back. Another time, again, while no one was home, and again, involving weed, a friend and I left a fresh bowl packed and ready to go on the coffee table while we stepped outside to do something else. We returned minutes later to find the bowl smoked to completion. On multiple occasions, I walked into the living room to find the painting upside down. I would get furious about this, thinking my roommates were messing with me, but with how angry I was and how I talked to them about it, I could see it in their eyes that nobody was responsible. Our neighbors had a cat who would just waltz into our house like he owned it, and we thought it was kind of funny, so we would let him. He was a good cat, so it wasn't really a problem. One night, as I was walking through the living room with the lights off, I heard the cat make a noise. I didn't know he was in the house, and we didn't keep food around, so I wanted to let him out. I turned on the light and looked over in the corner where I heard the noise. The goddamn painting was sitting there, leaning against the wall. That was the last straw. I insisted that my roommate bring it back to her studio. And all at once, everything stopped. No more unsettling feelings in the house. No more voices in the basement. Nothing. What I learned from this experience is this: no one, obviously, wants to live out a horror movie. At least when you're in your own horror movie, You eventually get some kind of explanation for the haunting or whatever is going down. What's even more terrifying is being the roommate in the horror movie. I never had any explanation. What was up with Kay? What's the deal with the painting? I don't know. And at this point, 2 years later, I don't give a dang.